Hello, Josh Palmer here, head of content. Thank you for folks that are joining in the room. We'll get started here at the top of the hour. Um, Appreciate your willingness to join us on a Wednesday afternoon in the Eastern time zone here. If you're joining us from other time zones, thank you. We do appreciate it. If you registered for the session on bold accountability and turning conflict into progress, you were in the right place at the right time. We're actually a little bit early. We'll give it another minute or two for folks to filter into the room. I think we had more than 300 registrants for this webinar, so we'll get a quorum here and we'll get started momentarily. Yeah, I'm always interested as we're writing here. I'm joining you obviously from Indianapolis, as you can see in my name tag on the screen there. Just curious what the representation from across the regions are. So I'm here in Indianapolis. Where are you guys joining us from? I'd be interested to see. Want to drop your Red River, New Mexico. Nice. New Hampshire. Very nice. PA. Love it. Oh, Canada. We've always got lots of friends in Canada. Toronto is one of my favorite places to go. That's great. Orange County. Wow. I'm always really prepared. Oh, Regina in Saskatchewan. Nice. Hope I didn't mispronounce that for our Canadian friends. Alaska. I think that is the farthest away. Whidbey Island. Awesome. Well, without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started with just some of the housekeeping slides that we have today, and then we'll have the full brunt of the presentation to get through over the next hour. We do like to start in on time, and we usually wrap up a little bit early. This is a webinar that's presented by Onboard. It's part of our Atlas Leadership Series. If you are interested in topics like these, we do have a monthly webinar every month. We've been doing that for about 3 or 4 years. So we bring great guests on governance topics like Dr. Emilie Socash to join us and talk through some of the things that are issues in the boardroom. So thank you for joining us and being part of this ongoing series. If you're not familiar with Onboard, we are a software solution, a SaaS-based solution. Our goal is to design and develop experiences that make board meetings simple, secure, and effective. And that's not only just in the board meeting itself, but all those episodic moments in between that make up the I'm at a loss for words, which is rare, the continuous boardroom experience. So that's a little bit about who we are. Currently, we have more than 6,000 board-like organizations that we're proud to have as customers of the Onboard product family. We host about 150,000 meetings per year on our platform, and that covers about 175,000 users. And we are very proud to be able to provide our solution in a global setting. We're in 60 plus countries. This is something I start, if you joined us before, you've seen this before, this is something I start every webinar with. Our co-founder and now executive board chair, Parun Chadha, started this idea of a board meeting management solution with the idea that there's 3 types of board meetings: the board meeting you prepared for, the one you had, and then the one you wish you had. And it's certainly our endeavor to always make sure you have that 3rd type of board meeting. A quick few light housekeeping notes. This is a webinar experience, so if you're joining us, you are mute by default, and your video is not on. That's just because we have so many people in the room. However, we do really appreciate your participation. I'm seeing Jamaica in the chat. That's amazing. We love questions, comments in the chat, or you can use the QA feature if you want to make sure your question gets answered. Either one of those, as Dr. Socash continues through her presentation, I will be on the back end participating there with you. So if you have any questions, even technical support questions, I can help you there. We do have an interactive poll. It's actually just one instead of the plural here. And this is not a Southwest Airlines gift card. I'm sorry, this is a holdover from a previous webinar. We're actually giving away an Nespresso virtual coffee machine. And I was just chatting with Emily and our webinar operator, Morgan. I drink about 5 or 6 of those a day. I'm a little bit over caffeinated on a day-to-day basis. So if you do engage with us and answer all the poll questions, your name will be put in the hat for the random drawing for that. So thank you. And last but not least, we do get this question on every webinar. We do want to address it early. Both the PowerPoint slides and an on-demand video will be sent to the email you registered with. We typically send that out within about 24 hours of the webinar's conclusion. So we do appreciate that. Even if you couldn't join us today or if you have to leave early, you will have the full webinar in your inbox within about 24 hours. Two quick promo items besides the Nespresso Virtuo coffee machine, which I'm a huge fan of. One thing that I've been working feverishly on in the last 6 weeks is our annual onboard board effectiveness survey. We had a really great participation this year. It's been a really dynamic year for boards across all industries. So we're really happy to say that we had data and responded survey information from more than 500 board professionals, revealing where they struggle and where they excel. That includes 6 board-led industries, so across the spectrum of board-led organizations. Every role that participates in the boardroom was represented in our survey. So we've got some really great data that I'm really excited about. Some of you are seeing here. And this is actually our 5th year of running this survey. So we have some really interesting year-over-year comparisons on what makes a board effective, what tools, capabilities, processes, workflows that go into that effectiveness. This is a little bit of sneak preview, and I think this is really interesting because AI is at the forefront of a lot of conversations, just not in our professional lives, but in the board as well. 69% of our respondents said that they have used AI in some capacity in service of their board work, which is really, really interesting to me as we see a lot of these tools and features get mainstreamed into all of our lives. And you see here a rundown of the most popular tools. I don't think it's any surprise that ChatGPT or Copilot are in the running there. Onboard is another AI-enabled tool that you can use. And another factor I thought was really important was that 40% or more have used more than one AI tool. So that's a topic I'm deeply interested in. We're going to have lots of great data. That publication will be coming out in the 1st or 2nd week of October, so either next week or soon after. We do have a question in the poll. If you're interested in the full survey results, we'll send you an early version of the survey. So just answer yes on that poll question, and we'll send you that information in your inbox. And then even more importantly, we had a great session earlier today with Emilie, Dr. Socash, if you prefer the formal title. Currently, this is for onboard customers only, so I apologize to anybody who's not an onboard customer that's joining us in the audience today. We do hope to expand this to a wider audience soon. But we're having small group sessions every single week, multiple days per week, where you can come in, any kind of governance related question that you have. Maybe it's an executive leadership challenge, maybe it's change management challenge, maybe you're having some issues with communicating to your board members. Emilie's made herself available. So this is a complimentary service to customers only right now, but we do hope to expand that base. I'll be dropping a link to the registration page. But if you're not an onboard customer, there is a survey question that says, will you be interested in a future session if we can invite you? Please answer yes to that. That'll help us gauge interest and hopefully expand this program. Basically, it's a smaller version of the webinar you're going to have today, more intimate, more personal setting with Emilie's great answers and guidance on board governance. So thank you if you're interested in there. We're really happy to be able to provide that. Emilie, I think we had a couple of one-on-one session slots still open for tomorrow. Those are 30-minute sessions, just you and Emilie, just talking about whatever board governance relation challenges you may be facing. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied here. So I'll drop the link there in the chat here in just a minute. But yeah, please do let us know if you're interested in more. And I'm super excited to introduce today's speaker. I've already mentioned her more than once, Dr. Emilie Socash. She's the founder of the Nonprofit Help Center. She has a ton of board work experience, both in leading boards and helping consult and advise them in their challenges day to day. And she's also obviously the host of our onboard governance Q&A sessions. Emilie, welcome back. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Josh. And I will take it from here. And as Josh mentioned, I do have a couple spots in our one-on-one sessions tomorrow. So please do check out that link if you are an onboard customer, and please do stay in touch if you're not yet a customer, because I have a feeling that we will have the opportunity to cross paths in the future. Now, Josh will let me know if you are not seeing my slides, but I am sharing our Brave Conversations, Bold Accountability, Turning Conflict into Progress slides here. And let's jump in, and we're going to start off with a quick review of our agenda. But before we do that, first of all, I'm sending lots of you. I didn't participate in the Where's Waldo chat conversation, but I'm sending all of you lots of Florida sunshine. I am in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida, And I love doing these webinars with Josh and with the onboard team. I would love to have you drop in the chat your thoughts on this question. When is conflict a good thing? Now, there's no right or wrong answer to this. I will not be picking anybody out, but just as we're going over our agenda, I would love to know where your thoughts are on that. Now, in our session today, we are going to explore constructive conflict and accountability through both the presentation here. I'll be sharing a couple resources that you'll get in a takeaway kit. And I'm going to encourage you to have a scratch pad handy because I do have a couple activities that you might find interesting. So we're going to be looking at two competencies, both constructive conflict and healthy accountability, all with the goal of strengthening our community organizational governance practices. So you will have your opportunity to consider your own leadership, the leadership among your stakeholders, and the leadership across the broader community. So we're going to look at a 3-conversation model to understand conflict through the lens of governance. We'll also be looking at healthy accountability and understanding 4 factors of accountability that go alongside our shared goal of organizational development. And then, as I mentioned, I have a little resource giveaway for you. It's not as good as an espresso, but I hope that you find it just as useful. So I'm going to pop into the chat. Oh, we have so many responses. Yes, conflict is great when it spurs active, honest discussion, when the issue is actually resolved in a positive way. Word to that. Conflict is good when it prompts new ideas and innovation, when it's bringing new ideas forth, other points of view. Yes, yes, 100 times. Yes, all of this. So let's start by setting the table. What is conflict overall? So conflict overall is a serious disagreement, and it often plays out over time. So some examples. The board and staff might see the budget priorities differently, how we handle shortfalls or how we handle staff raises, the use of endowment funds, right-sizing the staff or departments, and so forth. We might see conflict around politics, especially during a donor or a stakeholder conversation, even around our PR efforts. We might discover that we have differing positions on key issues. We also might see conflict around a project level, that our teams are trying to figure out who will do what by when, and different people believe different things around those questions. Now, is all conflict bad? As you all noted, there are a lot of good sides to conflict when we embrace constructive conflict, right? So constructive conflict, that's when our conflict is, as a lot of you called out, goal-oriented, it's respectful, and it's productive. I think we can all remember and come up with instances of when we've had destructive conflict. This is where it's hostile, it's avoidance prone, and typically the matter at hand is unresolved. Today, we're going to learn how to lean into and how to actually generate some constructive conflict. Now, why on earth would we want to generate conflict? Well, if we are pursuing constructive conflict, this can allow individuals, team members, board members to explore differing perspectives, to really clarify our priorities, to challenge our assumptions, to address underlying issues, and as some of you mentioned, to really uncover some innovative solutions. And especially at the board level, respectful disagreements can deepen our understanding of the organization's mission and can also strengthen the bonds between the people who we're serving alongside with. When we are able to express that commitment to the organizational values, to being honest, we find that it builds relationships. So I'd like to share with you a personal example of a conflict situation. So this is what I call the dinner drive dilemma. Here is one of our Florida beaches. It's very prevalent in the story I'm going to share. So let's unpack constructive versus destructive conflict in this example. So imagine, picture, if you will, My husband and I decide to go out to dinner on Sunset Beach. Sunset Beach, as you can imagine, is a great place to watch the sunset. We hop in the car and I say, let's take the long way over the bridges, through Madeira Beach and down Gulf Boulevard. It's kind of a roundabout way, but it's a beautiful drive. And he says, well, I really think we should just stick to the Treasure Island Causeway. That's the direct route. Now, maybe we stand in the driveway, each of us asserting our differing opinions. I say, oh, I think that Gulf Boulevard is more scenic. And he thinks that the Causeway is more logical. So just like in a lot of our organizational conflicts we face, there's only one route that we can take. We can't get into the car and both take two different routes. We have to actually go just one drive. Jean knows Madeira Beach is beautiful. Thank you, Jean, for calling out that. So if we stay in a destructive place, we're just going to butt heads, we're going to grumble, or we might even miss the sunset if we keep at it. But if we go into a constructive place, I might share with him that, taking the long way reminds me of our first date, or he might share that taking the causeway will give us 15 more minutes at the restaurant and a good chance at actually catching the sunset. I might share that there's a property I want to look at. I want to drive by and kind of like eyeball it. And he might say, you know what, my back is killing me. I don't want to be in the car for an extra 20 minutes. Either way, both of us have the same goal in mind, right? We want to get to dinner and we want to see the sunset. But conflict arises when we want to accomplish that goal in differing ways. I like David's suggestion in the chat. So every time we have any sort of a conflict, there's actually 3 conversations happening concurrently. There's the what happened conversation, there's the feelings conversation, and there's the identity conversation. Now, when we're in the destructive space, that's where we start getting hostile, right? And we're saying, you always, or I never, or we just don't name what's going on. But we're going to use my dinner drive example to take apart these 3 conversations that are happening all at the same time. So the what happened conversation is how we make sense of what is true, what was intended, and if there's any blame that's going on. The feelings conversation, well, that's about the emotional impact of the conflict. And then there's the identity conversation. This is where we explore how whatever we're conflicted about, how it scratches at our personal identity, who we think we are as people. Now, I didn't come up with this 3 conversation model. It's actually from a book called Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most. And so if this speaks to you, I highly suggest picking up that book. It's a classic. It's by Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. And the main idea here is that regardless of the words that are said, these 3 conversations are taking place. So the what happened conversation, this is where we look at facts, intention, and perceived blame. So in my example of the what happened conversation might be understood like this. So the facts for me are that I want to take the scenic route because to me it's more meaningful. It's sentimental. And my partner might prefer the faster route because that's efficient. Those are facts. That's what we want. My intention is that I think my way prioritizes kind of the emotional value, the nostalgia. And my spouse's preference is pretty practical, right? He wants comfort. He wants more time at the restaurant. Now, if we don't allow space for those 2 facts and intention sets to exist concurrently, we sometimes can dip into some sort of a blame situation. The perceived blame happens when both of us feel that the other one isn't valuing what is clearly a priority to the other person. Could be emotional significance. It could be practicality. Now, alongside that, we go one layer deeper. We have a feelings conversation that's happening. My feelings are that I might feel dismissed if my partner says, hey, we're just going to go on the causeway. That's the end of it. I might think he doesn't appreciate my sentimental reasons for this scenic drive. Now, he might feel conversely frustrated, undervalued, or even physically uncomfortable if I push for the longer route without acknowledging that he's got his own set of needs, like minimizing the time spent in the car. Now, ideally, we can get to this point of acknowledgement where we both say, hey, I have feelings about this. You have feelings about this. I have nostalgia. You have anxiety. I have shared values. You have discomfort. And then finally, a third level of conversation, the identity conversation, might look something like this. My identity, I might think of myself as someone who values experiences, someone who is sentimental, and I value those things over efficiency. Pushing for the scenic route might reinforce my identity as someone who is just a softie who loves sentimental, cherished moments. My spouse, his identity comes into the room too. He might see himself as practical and efficient and considerate of physical comfort or time-sensitive opportunities like a sunset. So when he wants to go the causeway, he feels like that's the right way. The third part of the identity conversation is, what does this say about both of us in relationship to each other? What is the impact of our relationship? And so both of us may end up feeling that our values aren't being respected and that we disconnect. And this is what's going on behind the scenes in conflicts, great and small. I gave you a tiny example, and I'm going to guess that each of you probably can think of in the past few days a similar tiny conflict situation where all of these 9 different little box factors came to bear. We can easily see how hard it can be to find common ground if we don't leverage these 3 conversations, bring them into the light to have a learning conversation. So let's transition into what is a learning conversation. This is where we're taking conflict to have a conversation that's open, respectful. It includes dialogue that is focused on understanding different perspectives, emotions, and values to foster mutual insight and collaborative problem solving. So in a learning conversation, we move from the spoken to the unspoken conflict messages to greater understanding and connection. We don't seek to win. This is not a win-lose situation, but we do seek to understand and to move closer to the other person's vantage point, even if we don't agree. The goal, therefore, is to change our own assumptions as they relate to the conflict. Now, in your packet that's going to be coming out at the close of this webinar, you will see that I've given you some examples of how a conflicted conversation might transition into a learning conversation. I picked out a couple examples that are my favorites. So in this one, in a conflicted conversation, we might assume, we've probably all been in this situation, we might assume that I know what they intended. My goal in a conflicted conversation might be to let them know that what they did was wrong. So there's a time and place for this, but in the boardroom, we likely don't know each other well enough to know exactly what they intended. So going to a learning conversation, we want to go in with the assumption that I know what I intended and I know what impact that this conflict had on me, but I can't know what's in their head. The goal, therefore, becomes to share the impact that this conflict had on me and to find out what they actually intended and to find out what my impact is on them. Here's one other example. In a conflicted conversation, we might have the assumption that feelings are irrelevant to what we're talking about. There's no need to share them. For example, if your finance committee is having a meeting and there's a little bit of heated discussion about how we're going to make payroll or what the terms of an endowment distribution might be, it can be tempting to say feelings aren't relevant to this. This is a money conversation. The goal might be in that instance to avoid talking about feelings, or alternatively, let them have it. Now, in a learning conversation, we might recognize that feelings are actually at the heart of the situation. They are complex, and I might have to dig a little bit to see why are we having such conflict here? What is the feeling that's rising up for you? And the goal here is not to have a kumbaya, hug it out moment, but rather to just address everyone's feelings with no judgment, no attribution to intent, and to just acknowledge the feelings. It clears the decks before we go into problem solving mode. Now, I have given you in your takeaway packet a wonderful worksheet that I will show at the very end. It's 2 pages that walks through how to dissect a past conversation or even how to prepare for an upcoming conversation. For the past conversations, you'll find that you can sketch out what happened, what emotions were present for you, try and kind of read the other person's mind a little bit, what was coming up for them, and then what really stuck with you about this conflicted conversation. If you want to use this worksheet for an upcoming conversation where you anticipate things might be going a little bit sideways, you can think through how you can structure towards a learning conversation. You'll see that the worksheet includes an opportunity to really sketch out what's my position and what do I want to get out of this conversation. So stay tuned for that. I'll show that to you at the end, and it'll be in your packet. Now, I have a question for you for the chat. We're going to dovetail all of this conflict conversation information into some conversation about accountability. Now, if you're like me, the word accountability might give you hives, but we're just talking about healthy accountability. We're going to do some practice on that. But I am curious, if you feel comfortable sharing in the chat, what is one accountability practice that you and your board do that you feel really works? I would love to have a little bit of a show and share in the chat. So take a moment to think about, what do you do that works? Just one example. And while you're thinking, let's talk about how conflict and accountability are connected concepts. So, constructive conflict can really be supported by healthy accountability, because constructive conflict provides structure and clarity around how we activate in our roles, right? So, just as we look to constructive conflict to build those learning conversations help our organizations grow. Accountability is what maintains the trust and effectiveness within our board service around that board table. So if conflict arises from a difference in perspective or a difference in understanding, then accountability is what will help us provide the structure to really activate and navigate through that conflict. Thank you, Erica, for sharing that they are working on getting the board more involved. Feels a little bit performative, and there's no real conflict because there's not an investment in decision making. I've been on that board before. Angelique mentions using a person's name when asking for information or volunteering for a task. I love that. It's so subtle, but very effective. Josh mentioned the listener interprets what you say, not you. I love that, Josh. And Carrie mentions standing on the policy. Like, well, what does the policy say? Let's go back to the policy. I love that. Mission and vision. Thank you, Susan. Setting expectations. Thank you, Laura. And all of these speak to those 3 types of meetings that Josh mentioned at the beginning of our session, right? Like, we have the opportunity to have 3 meetings, but the ones that we want to use accountability practices for is the meeting that we wish we had, right? Oh, Priscilla, focusing on the situation and not on the person. Yes, very good. Keep all of these light in the back of your mind, because we're going to actually, in a little while, we're going to frame out an accountability manifesto. And some of these things, I have a feeling, are going to make it to your own manifestos. So let's take the hives out of accountability and talk about what healthy accountability is. So healthy accountability is the practice of setting clear expectations, following through on commitments, and fostering open, respectful communication. And all of this is in service of supporting growth, building trust, and ensuring mutual responsibility within the entire organization, within the body that is the board, within a team, within a department. So a healthy accountability can happen at all of those levels. Now, there are actually two types of accountability that come up, and this is applicable in nonprofits, for-profits, universities, foundations. It's two sides of the same coin. We have implementation accountability and impact accountability. This is how we get more specific about these healthy accountability practices. So first, we have implementation accountability. This is our ability to hold ourselves responsible for making and keeping our plans that push our organization's missions forward. Impact accountability is where we hold ourselves accountable to making a difference in the lives of our community members, the lives of our donors, our investors, our stakeholders, and even our colleagues. So implementation, it's how we implement around the plan that we had, and impact is how we are making a difference. Now, accountability happens in both of these ways, both implementation and impact accountability, across the governance spectrum as well as the management spectrum. Now, one of the takeaways that you'll have in your packet is a chart that breaks down the different tasks that typically fall within implementation accountability and typically fall within impact accountability. And you likely won't be surprised when you see that I've labeled on that chart implementation accountability, typically mostly falling on the professional staff and management side of things. Impact accountability, typically often falling on the board and the governance side of things. But you will see a third column right in the middle for those shared accountabilities. So I hope that you enjoy that takeaway. Now, in each of these elements of accountability, whether it falls on staff or board, whether it's management or governance, there are 4 factors that ensure that we are successful in the accountability, holding each other accountable for these activities. So factor 1, assignment. So assignment is really just answering the question, is it clear who is responsible to do this? Is it clear to them, and is it clear to others? So think about it this way. Accountability starts with clarity. And so when responsibility is clearly assigned, everyone knows who is expected to do what, by when, and to what standard. So ambiguity is one of the fastest ways that accountability breaks down. I know you all know that. And effective assignment names the task, it identifies the person or the team that's responsible, and it sets expectations for deadlines and outcomes. So that's assignment. Our second factor is ability and resources. This answers the question, does the person or the team assigned have the ability and the resources to complete this role? So accountability is only fair when people have the tools, the skills, the support that they need to be successful. So without adequate training, without access to information, without the authority to act or the right resources, including time, even the most motivated person can't deliver. Their accountability will be empty because they don't have the right ability or the right resources. So when we ensure that ability and resources are in place, this actually shows respect for each individual that's involved in the task, and it creates the conditions for real ownership and a bolstered sense of accountability. The third factor is there a means of measuring progress? And success, progress and success. So clear metrics make accountability visible. Have you all heard that saying that we monitor what we measure? That, if you're really trying to improve or succeed on something, you have to measure it in order to really keep track of it. And so when we define how success will be measured, so this could be data, it could be milestones, it could be qualitative benchmarks, it could be dollars raised, it could just be meeting the deadline for your board report. All of these things make progress trackable. So measurement is what keeps our efforts from slipping into this black hole of assumptions. I imagine something's happening with that, and provides both the individual and the organization or the team or the board the tangible signs that we are moving towards our goal. Now, finally, our fourth factor answers the question, is there a regular cadence of feedback that's offered? And is it offered in a way that is timely, useful, and pertinent? So feedback, it's not just what you think. It has to be timely, useful, and pertinent. So accountability is sustained through timely, constructive feedback, of course. When we recognize what's working, we are able to reinforce good practices. And while we address challenges early, this will prevent problems from compounding. So when we do feedback loops, whether that's through regular check-ins, performance conversations, or peer input, this is how we ensure that accountability isn't just about judgment at the end, but it's about it's about support and course correction along the way. So it certainly feels like a really big task when we're thinking about balancing management versus governance, all the while ensuring that everyone is accountable for clearly assigned tasks, that folks have the abilities and the resources, that progress is measured and feedback is offered, right? That is a tall, tall order. This is where conflict to learning conversations comes into play. Because remember how we talked about the goal of creating a learning conversation. So when we want to bolster healthy accountability in our organizations, we use the same mindset of those 3 conversations and then transitioning into a learning conversation. In this way, we can challenge assumptions, we can get curious, and we can also create space for understanding. So we're going to bring together all of this that we've learned about healthy conflict, learning conversations, and accountability from a healthy perspective into an accountability charter. So what is an accountability charter? An accountability charter is a guiding, it could be a document, it could be an informal just set of agreed upon practices that you and your team, you and your board, you and your colleagues agree, hey, this is how we want to treat each other and how we want to hold each other accountable. So I'm challenging you to take a scratch piece of paper as I give you a few examples here in just a moment to consider your own board and your own team. Think about the board as a whole. Think about the people around the table. I'm curious, where are your conflict sticking points and what dance do you often do? So I serve on a board in my home community that is a large social service agency, and I'm the secretary of the board, very esteemed executive committee member. And I can see some of the choreography that we occasionally enter into during a meeting where someone brings up New business at the very end of the meeting, but only when there's a few minutes left, and it gets tabled until the next meeting, and it gets kind of thrown into the ether. But not every board member likes that. And so there's a little bit of conflict about, well, we need more time, or do we need to stay later, or do we need this to be on the agenda, or what's our process for handling this sort of the new business aspect of our agenda. That could be a conflict sticking point. That could be a dance that we often do. So think on your own. I'm not going to ask you to share this particular part, but I actually am encouraging you after our session today to keep that little dance in mind as you look at the accountability manifesto worksheet that I'm going to share with you, and see what fits for you, what might be a good solution for some of these dances that we do with each other. So I mentioned that I'm giving you a list. It's maybe 18 or 20 different examples. I'm giving you a few examples here. So what an accountability charter incorporates are standards of behavior around accountability. So here are 3 of my favorite examples. One is about positive intent. So your charter or manifesto might include, we begin with the assumption that everything is done with positive intent. How much conflict would that unstick in so many aspects? There was somebody, Tina Marie, mentioned in the chat, taking the emotion out of the conversation, right? That's part and parcel to beginning with the assumption that everything is done with positive intent, even if it's done differently than we think it should be done. My second favorite example is getting comfortable and normalizing asking for help. So this one is, we encourage everyone to identify where they're struggling and where they need help. So many of the challenges that we have at the staff and at the board level can be addressed by getting comfortable with asking for help. And another note about the asking for help. So sometimes as humans, we put up barriers to asking for help. We don't want to be the one in the room that says, I don't understand what's happening here, or I missed a meeting. Can you please bring me up to speed? Or I didn't read the packet beforehand and I need a little extra hand holding. But yet, normalizing and encouraging folks to ask for help where they need it actually is very efficient for the organization, because we spend less time wading through confusion. Another favorite of mine is being prepared, such as we hold ourselves responsible for being prepared and engaged, bringing our best efforts to each task and interaction. That's a great one for a board. I highly suggest that makes your list. Another 3 favorite examples of mine. Checking in. We check in regularly to make sure everyone has the abilities and the time to be successful in their work. So think about this one. This one, if you have a conflict dance that you and your board or you and your colleagues often do that relates to perhaps lack of availability for project check-ins. A great way to make that part of your practice is to incorporate something like this into your accountability charter, but then to remind each other and to say, hey, you know what? It's been a week since I've heard about your progress on this, and I know that it's important to us. We all agree that we check in regularly to make sure that everyone has what they need to be successful. 2 more of my favorites, giving feedback. We make sure that feedback is useful, timely, and clear. I mentioned this one earlier. It's probably my number 2 favorite of this whole list. The critical thing here is we don't start the conversation with, hey, can I give you a little feedback? Rather, we say, hey, I have some feedback when you're ready about this project that is upcoming. We want to make sure it's useful, that we're giving feedback that can either improve the outcome or improve the person. There's no sense in telling somebody that their one-off donor pitch went poorly if they're not going to do another one. We want it to be timely, to be at a time when they can take action or immediately following something that needs a little bit more. And then clear. We want to make sure that the feedback that we're giving is, as Josh said earlier, it's not just clear to us, but it's also clear to the recipient. And then finally, who will do what by when? WWDW, BW. Who will do what by when? We communicate our commitments clearly, ensuring everyone understands their roles and expectations. So there's not a bad one in the bunch here as you're crafting your own manifesto and your own charter. Now, how would you use this charter? It doesn't have to be a formal stamped policy, but let's say that personally that you and some of your close colleagues have adopted several of these charter accountability practices. You might post it visibly on your desk or in your workspace. You might save it as a note to your phone, just to remind yourself, hey, I assume positive intent. You might refer to it when facing conflict or approaching learning conversations. A refresher might be necessary. You, if with your team and your peers, you might call out instances when colleagues are living by the charter. This is great for board members to be able to say, hey, thank you, Josh, for providing feedback that was timely, useful, and clear. That was really helpful. You might read it aloud at a project kickoff meeting or at monthly meetings. And again, we're just talking about like 3 bullet points. And then with leadership, an accountability charter can be a great means of introducing this accountability culture during the onboarding of staff and board and volunteers. You can also reference it on one-on-one coaching or private board conversations that you have. Just as a reminder, this is a practice we all agreed on. Now, I'm curious, which of these speak to you? And as you are thinking on which speak to you, I'm going to pull up a little sneak peek, take the last couple minutes of our time, a little sneak peek of the resources that I'm going to be sending out to you. And let me just pull them up in a large format. Bear with me, folks. I'm going to just share it this way. So first things first, I mentioned to you that I'm going to be sharing with you a conflict conversation worksheet. That's what we're looking at here. And you'll see this is something, take 10 minutes with it, take 15 minutes with it to really get into either what happened in a past conflict conversation, or more useful probably is preparing for a conversation that you know could be a little bit sticky going forward. In this worksheet, you'll take a minute to think about what's the problem from my point of view, what data is behind my story, what are my relevant past experiences, and then consider it from the other person's point of view. You can also go deep on considering how have you contributed to this situation? How have they contributed to this situation? What were my intentions? What were their intentions? What's the impact on us? And then on the second sheet, a little bit about like what feelings is this stirring up? Frustration, anger, disappointment. Usually there's very few happy emotions that are happening during a conflict conversation. And then think about, of this whole cast of characters of our emotions, which ones actually are relevant to this situation? I then give you a little note about what do I fear that this says about me? What do they fear that this says about them? Is this true? Is it not true? And then finally, what do I want out of this conversation? What is the whole point of this? Now, I also mentioned that I have a chart of conflicted conversations versus learning conversations. This is just a couple pages of examples of that. And then I do offer you a management versus governance, implementation accountability versus impact accountability chart to compare and contrast. And then finally, here is the piece that I mentioned right at the end of our session. These are ideas, couple dozen, maybe 20 of ideas that you can incorporate into your own accountability charter. So these will be part of your post-meeting post-meeting packet along with all of the slides from today's show. So I'm just popping into the chat here. We are wrapping up our time, and I want you to be thinking about questions that you might have. I love Carrie's comment here, setting expectations before the need arises. That's a good one. And I see that Jean is also sharing some resources. Oh, and Josh also mentioned something that came from the recent onboard survey about boards typically rank themselves as least effective in the communication between meetings. And I find that to be particularly fascinating because that is when the action happens. That's where the rubber meets the road. And so I really think that there's something to really unpack there. Now, I want to give you just kind of a closing little snapshot of what we've covered today. So, just as a reminder, we have covered our constructive conflict, our healthy accountability, and we just covered our takeaways. And as final means, as you're thinking about any questions you might have for me, here is my final request of you is reflecting on your experience in today's webinar. I am curious to know what stood out for you, anything surprising that we came across, anything that was a little bit of a struggle, like when I say the word accountability, and what did you find valuable? I would love to hear from you in the chat, and I would also welcome your questions. So I'm going to stop my share officially here. There we go.
Thank you, Emily.
You're very welcome.
I'm happy to say that we've got a few participants already signed up for some of the group sessions, so I'm excited about that.
I can't wait to meet you all.
Yeah, I'm going to reshare that link just because I know it was a little bit higher up in the chat. And then while we're doing that, I'm going to ask our webinar operator, Morgan, to display our survey. Just a reminder, Espresso Vergio, the Stormio pod is probably my favorite if you're a caffeine user like myself. So there's a few more questions than we typically ask, but we are interested in having you participate in some group and one-on-one sessions with Emily here. Got a quick question from Carrie, or I guess it's more of a statement, but I guess more exposition on classifying the types of conflict. Or maybe that's what they found most valuable. I apologize.
I think that that's what Carrie found most valuable, but Carrie, do clarify if you do have a further question around that. Thank you, Sherlina, for noting that, and Shelley, for noting that the accountability charter is something you might keep in your hip pocket.
I love Yesenia's question. What do we do when we get nervous or try to avoid conflict? That's such a human reaction, and it is difficult to power through that. I'm curious your thoughts, Emily.
So my thoughts, when I put on my psychologist hat, I think naming it, just as Yesenia has, to say, hey, I need to have a difficult conversation with you. Just naming it, just not putting on a strong face, often has a soothing effect on everybody involved. Now, I also think that if you do go through, like just one time, maybe twice, go through that worksheet and like really think on each of those points, you will go into a conversation feeling so prepared, understanding your own position and making an attempt to understand somebody else's position. So preparation, and don't feel pressured to go into any conversation until you feel like you're ready.
And this is when we did the pre-meeting brief with you, Emily. This is one question I had. I think Dominique is talking about this, but how do you move or pull that point of view out of somebody who may be conflict adverse? My board governance brain goes immediately, well, that's the role of the chair, but it's not just the chair's responsibility. How do you get that point of view from somebody you may know who may be actively avoiding conflict just because that's their personality or just that's how they are as a person?
So there's a couple ways we can do that, right? We can work behind the scenes where board chair and exec might have a coffee conversation with a person to say, hey, in last week's board meeting, I saw that you seem to be chewing on something, some deeper thoughts, but they didn't get shared into the room. Is there more you want to share with us? So that's one way to do it. In the space, though, one of my favorite ways of drawing in or trying to engage someone who is conflict averse in a heated conversation is to actually keep a tally of, okay, so we've heard from Josh, we've heard from Emilie, Carrie, we haven't yet heard from you. What would you add to this conversation? And just inviting, very low barrier to entry, but inviting comment directly from somebody who is conflict averse. Now, the other half of the question that Dominique asked, how do we hold others accountable during a board meeting? So that one's a little bit trickier. And one way is to edge out bad behavior by really doubling down on good behavior. And what that might look like is, hey, Dominique, I really appreciated how you, and then insert whatever your accountability charter item is, and really calling attention to folks who are actually abiding by good accountability practices. And typically, accountability gives people hives because they relate it to being called out in a meeting. So, negative feedback, always behind closed doors, positive feedback, always out in the open.
I like that as well. And the other point I would proffer as well, Emily, is that there are a number of survey and feedback mechanisms that you can draw that maybe it's negative criticism, maybe it's just like, hey, I didn't like the way this part of the meeting went. You can get that anonymously, whether that's just a one-off like a type form, or if it's an integrated survey component within a board management system like ours. But those feedback loops certainly help optimize the next session if you're listening to those actively. So
exactly. And Josh, something that you and I talked about in our prep session was, particularly in our virtual meetings or virtual hybrid, like, oh, we're going every other month, we don't have the opportunity to understand intent as much as we think we do. We don't know body language. We are only one person is talking at a time. We can't have those side conversations. As much as we say we shouldn't have side conversations, they are a critical means of building belonging in a board. And we lose a lot in that virtual space. And so that can also be a critical difference to navigating conflict, because we just don't know intent. And it's very common to infer intent where intent doesn't actually exist.
Emily, we took the survey down too quickly.
I see that several people are eager to get into the
Yeah.
coffee machine.
So yeah, one of the free text questions, and yeah, if you do note that the survey went away too quickly, I will make sure that you're entered for the drawing. But one of the free text question that I think a lot of people are asking about was, what topics would you find best or most suitable for a small group session with Dr. Socash, whether in a group setting. Our group settings are limited to 12 participants at max over a span of 2 hours. And then the one-on-one sessions are 30 minutes apiece individually. So yeah, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We'll certainly consider those. And it's very helpful for us to understand what is a kind of a more specific topic for those settings. My apologies. I think we are very close to running out of time. Any more questions in the chat? The chat has been going rapid fire here. So.
It really has been. I've been watching it fly by.
Yeah, the importance of conflict and decision. I think that is, to take it back to board governance basics, that is the very role of the board, is that not everybody has the same point of view, that you do want that diverse set of viewpoints, and you do want to consider the other professional or lived or just expertise experiences that other people may have. And I would even proffer to say that that is the very reason for a board, is because you don't want groupthink in that setting.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. We don't want an echo chamber. We want to have diverse perspectives. Now, somewhere along the way, I think it was David, but it could have been somebody else, asked the most critical question here. Which way did we drive to dinner? And I'll tell you, the way that we drove the direct route. But as fate would have it, the drawbridge was up, and so it took forever anyways.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
About the journey.
A couple other questions. One was the difference between a code of conflict or a code of conduct and accountability chapter or accountability charter. Sorry.
So a code of conduct typically covers things like board attendance policies, board giving policies, preparation for meetings, that sort of thing. An accountability charter is something that can be it infuses life into the practice. And as you'll see, the examples that are in that sheet, those examples are very action oriented and they're queued up for positive reminder. Like, hey, Josh, remember that we all agreed that we're going to do things this way. This is how we keep things, keep ourselves accountable. One other person asked for books about conflict. And so in addition to the one that I mentioned, which is called Difficult Conversations, there also is another book called The Culture Code, which I find tremendously useful. It's about building culture within an organization, but it is through the lens of conversation, conflict, accountability practices. So I do recommend that one as well.
I have two recommendations. I was just going to my bookshelf. I don't have the jacket on this one, but this one's called, it's not board specific, but it's called No Hard Feelings. Basically separating your personal life from your professional life. And if anybody hasn't gone through StrengthsFinder program, that is an amazing resource. It actually uncovers the sources of conflict between two different types of personalities and the why behind the what. So highly recommend that one. I've got a lot of notes on this one.
I second both of those choices.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we have less than a minute to go. Question about, do you think formalities help or hinder? And then there's a follow-up question about Robert's Rules of Order. So yeah, parliamentary conduct within a board, does that help or hinder conflict avoidance or resolution?
So in short, it's always good to have structure. It's always good to have a rule book, right? So I think of Robert's Rules of Order and formalities, something like a dress code. It's something that we can enforce to make sure that we're acting in a civilized way, but it also is something that we can digress from at the pleasure of the chair or as the situation arises. So I'm a big fan of structure, but I'm also a big fan of recognizing what is going on in the room when we need to divert from that structure.
Yeah, and somebody knows that even Robert's Rules says you don't need to follow Robert's Rules, which is
exactly.
Rule, so. Great. We're going to end on time. Emily, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to join these sessions with you. Yes, participants, we will send Emily's PowerPoint deck, the on-demand recording, the accountability charter documents, and then I'll also include in that a couple of the book recommendations that we had. So it'll be a more lengthy email than we're used to, but happy to provide those recommendations. And thank you, audience members, for joining us. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Josh. Have a good day.